It all begins just outside a doctor's office, where the head physician looks deeply concerned while the protagonist's parents anxiously ask about their son's health. After an awkward moment of silence, the visibly nervous doctor suddenly asks what they do for a living. The father replies that he's a sumo wrestler, specifically, a grand champion yokozuna. When they ask what the health issue is, the doctor becomes so agitated that he throws the medical report on the floor and shouts that the boy is healthy. However, he shows them an X-ray in which the child's body appears so round it looks like a ball. The doctor explains that it's likely a genetic issue. His metabolism turns everything he eats into fat, and warns that he will probably never lose weight and will be bullied for it. Hearing this, the child is devastated. He crushes his snack packet in his hands and vows that from that day forward, he will do everything he can to slim down. From then on, he works out every single day without fail. But instead of losing weight, his body continues to gain mass. By the age of 7, he already weighs 83 kilograms. He tries swimming and all kinds of exercise, but by the time he's 9, he weighs 120 kilograms, and by 11, he reaches 180 kilograms. He's now so massive that during car races, he can outrun the vehicles, creating chaos wherever he goes. Even in fast food restaurants, he only eats salads and raw food, never junk. He climbs mountains, lifts weights, and trains constantly, but nothing seems to work. Later, in the present day, a boy is playing video games in the middle of class until a classmate tells him to pay attention, and asks if he's not afraid of the teacher. Laughing, he replies that the teacher can't see him because he's sitting behind the protector of all men, Big Daddy Shirtian, the protagonist, who is now 16 years old and weighs 420 kilograms. He's so huge that he completely blocks the back half of the classroom, allowing the students behind him to slack off without being seen by the teacher. Although the doctor warned him he'd be alone, the protagonist believes he has friends. After all, everyone calls him Big Daddy and even pays him to protect them from bullies. Seen as a guardian, one classmate gives him a chocolate bar and asks him to sit in the front row in the next class. But Shirtian replies that he's on a diet and only drinks bitter melon or celery juice. The other student says he already prepared those drinks for him. However, while drinking, Shirtian feels uneasy. Although he considers them friends, he senses they see him more as a father figure than as an equal. Suddenly, someone throws a ball at his face, and a group of boys starts mocking him, demanding money so they can buy something. Shirtian watches them calmly as they threaten him, saying he'd better hand over the cash unless he wants a beating. Nearby students are alarmed when they realize the bullies are third-year students and members of the boxing club. Shirtian sighs, turns around, and walks away. But before leaving, he asks a classmate for a metal ball, which he throws so hard at the soccer goal that it dents the iron frame. When the bullies see him pick up another ball, they panic and run away, yelling for their lives. In that moment, the protagonist reflects that his size and strength make him powerful, but also condemn him to loneliness. Meanwhile, the blonde bully says the incident was humiliating and that they must get revenge to save face. Another student replies that Shirtian looks like a tank. He doesn't even seem human. But the blonde says there might be another way to get back at him. The story then shifts to a gym, where Shirtian is lifting weights, unaware that the bullies are watching from outside. They've discovered he trains there every day. One of them wonders why someone so strong trains in secret. But the gray-haired one warns that if they provoke Big Daddy again, they might not escape this time. He admits he can't beat Shirtian in a direct fight, but he thinks he can at least annoy him. He pulls out chains and padlocks from his backpack and locks all the gym's exits. Then, he lights a cigarette, drops it onto the floor still lit, and leaves. Meanwhile, inside the gym, Shirtian pulls an inflatable pool and other items from his bag. He inflates it with his mouth, fills it with water, places a wooden board on the surface, and lies on top of it, marking the water level with a box cutter. He then gets out, places metal balls on the board until the water reaches the same level, and finally weighs them on a scale, discovering his weight is now 421 kilograms. Realizing he's gained another kilo, he breaks down in tears, devastated by the number. Just then, he notices that the fire has started spreading in the gym. Wondering how it began, he doesn't hesitate. He pours all the water from the pool over himself, and begins slamming the doors with brute force to escape. Eventually, he breaks through and collapses on the ground outside, convinced he's going to die. The entire gym burns to the ground, leaving behind only rubble and ash. Suddenly a hand emerges from the wreckage, and miraculously it's Tian, now completely slim. Seeing his reflection in a nearby mirror, he's stunned. At first, he thinks it's someone else and asks if the person was also caught in the fire. Enraged, he grabs the mirror, shattering it and cutting his hand. But when he touches his face, he's shocked to realize it really is him. He's now handsome, and he can't believe it. At that moment, he hears police cars and fire trucks approaching and realizes he's completely naked at the scene of a fire. He can't let himself be seen like this. He finds a flag and uses it to cover his body. Next, the scene shifts to the city streets. People are walking as usual until Tian runs past two girls, who, instead of being upset, are stunned and mesmerized by his appearance. He then passes by some elderly women dancing in the street, and they, too, fall in love with him at first sight. A man talking on the phone in his car sees him running naked alongside the vehicle. Distracted, he crashes into a tree. In despair, he starts crying, saying that his followers only want to see videos of his rabid dog character and pay no attention to his other content. The protagonist keeps running, but soon finds himself completely surrounded by girls and women, which makes him wonder if he's reached the highest level of male attractiveness. The women chase after him, saying he's showing youthful spirit. Some call him a pervert, but admit he's incredibly handsome and ask for his contact info. He feels embarrassed and recalls how students used to crowd around him in the past, though this situation feels both different and oddly familiar. He planned to sneak back home, but people keep chasing him until suddenly, he's hit with intense hunger for no clear reason. The scene shifts to the teacher's lounge at school, where a teacher receives a call from the protagonist's parents saying their son is sick. The teacher is stunned and wonders how it's even possible. What kind of virus could make someone like him sick? He even searches online for biological viruses like the T-virus, questioning whether humanity is in danger of extinction. Next, the story moves to the protagonist's house. His computer shows searches for rapid weight loss. He's sitting on the couch watching a teen idol show, and when the dancers start moving, he mimics each and every step from the screen. He's shocked at how easily he follows the choreography and how light his body feels, even compared to the performers. Looking in the mirror, he wonders if that's really how he looks now that he's lost weight. And although for a moment he thinks it might be a dream, the physical sensations confirm it's all real. He laughs in relief, realizing he's not dreaming. But at that exact moment, his stomach starts growling loudly. He feels a deep, gnawing hunger. On the floor are empty wrappers from fast food and snack packs. He's already eaten all the food in his house. This is his 5th meal of the day. The scene opens in front of a hospital. Inside, a doctor can't believe the protagonist looked completely different just the day before. He points at him and asks if he's really the same person. The protagonist confirms he is, and the doctor, shocked, orders a full-body checkup, height measurement, CT scan, everything. 2 hours later, the results come in. Still in disbelief, the doctor tells him that his blood pressure, cholesterol, and protein levels are all perfectly normal, right in the healthy middle range. He says if he hadn't personally reviewed the protagonist's medical history, he'd think someone was trying to fool him. But he has to admit, the guy is completely healthy, so healthy it feels unreal. The protagonist asks if that's good or bad, since he lost all his weight overnight and can't stop feeling hungry. On top of that, he spent $3,800 just to be told he's fine. The doctor replies sarcastically, "What did you expect? In just 2 hours, you've made my 40 years of medical experience useless." Half an hour later, the protagonist walks across a crosswalk, thinking the checkup was useless. Ever since the night he caught fire, he hasn't stopped feeling an unbearable hunger. He spots 2 girls, but he's really eyeing the bun one of them is holding. He feels like there's a black hole in his stomach. As he keeps walking, he notices food in the hands of every person he passes. His hunger grows so intense that he starts running, drooling uncontrollably. He thinks his stomach is eating itself from the inside, and that if this continues, he might lose his mind and turn into a cannibal. To stop the hunger, he heads to a restaurant called BFC, where a young woman asks for his order. He slams the counter and demands every item on the menu, with double portions of each dish. Then he goes to another place and asks for everything they have in stock. He does the same at a third, and again at a fourth. Finally, he returns home completely full, having also gathered as much food as possible for later. While eating a burger, he remembers a childhood moment. He asked his parents what that delicious thing was. His mom smiled and told him that as long as he was happy, it didn't matter. But his dad approached with a serious face and told him to remember the name, because it was junk food. In the present, the protagonist breaks down crying, saying he hadn't eaten junk food since that day. For 10 years, he followed a strict vegan diet to lose weight. Now he sobs uncontrollably, saying how much he missed that food he used to love. Later, while thinking quietly, he realizes that even though he's full now and has saved some food for later, considering the insane appetite he's had lately, that stash will only last him a single day. That thought fills him with deep sadness. Determined to find a solution, he prepares to take some Chinese weight loss medicine. Holding the bottle, he remembers how he used to fear eating when he was overweight. But now, slim, his appetite has multiplied by 20. Convinced that the only way to fix this hunger is through unproven remedies, he hopes the treatment will work. However, as he holds the bottle too long, it starts to heat up. Suddenly, he drops it when he hears a boiling sound. The liquid spills all over his body. Shocked, he realizes he doesn't feel any burns, which is strange since the bottle wasn't even on a stove. Looking at his hands, he tries to check his body temperature, but the thermometer explodes on contact. He grabs a kitchen thermometer and, to his astonishment, discovers his body temperature has reached 230 degrees Fahrenheit. Over the next 3 days, he ran several tests on his body and discovered 3 major changes. His height had decreased from 220 centimeters to about 187. His weight had dropped from 480 kilograms to just 62, and his appetite had increased 20-fold. On top of that, his metabolic rate had skyrocketed to such a degree that his hands would heat up rapidly while eating, burning calories at an alarming speed. If he didn't eat frequently, the sensation of extreme hunger would overwhelm him, and his hands would continue heating up uncontrollably. He also discovered that his body had become completely immune to heat. Later, he received a notification on his phone indicating extremely high physical maintenance costs. 1 week later, he finally returned to school. 2 classmates were chatting about the Big Papa until they noticed that all the students on the balcony were watching a slim and attractive young man. One of them commented sadly that he thought Big Papa hadn't shown up, but both were left speechless when they realized all eyes were on this new figure. The protagonist realized this was what happened when someone became physically attractive. Women were drawn to him, and men were left stunned. However, when asked who he was, no one recognized him. This indifference filled him with frustration. He had expected admiration for his transformation, and it hurt deeply to go unnoticed. Then, a girl called out to him and asked if he was the boy she had seen in her dream the night before. At that moment, he angrily replied that he was the legendary Big Papa Shirtian. Everyone fell silent, not believing him. So, he began recounting in detail all the hardships they had faced together, including the time a classmate was attacked by 17 people. Then he started revealing personal secrets about each person present, which finally convinced them. Everyone confirmed that yes, he really was Big Papa Shirtian. The girls instantly fell head over heels for him due to his new appearance. They began calling him Daddy, and surrounded him, while the other boys broke down crying, devastated that all the girls had gone to him and convinced they'd be alone forever. At that moment, inside the classroom, the teacher enthusiastically announced that Big Papa had returned, prompting joyful cheers from the class. The protagonist calmly made his way to his seat just as the lesson was about to begin. However, the student sitting behind him pulled out a monitor and a controller to start gaming, while the girl behind that boy began to dance. One by one, all the students in the back started doing whatever they wanted instead of studying. Still, one student felt frustrated, but this time, things were different. The girl next to the gamer asked him to pay attention, and wondered if he wasn't afraid of getting caught by the teacher. The boy arrogantly replied, asking who would dare catch him. After all, the teacher couldn't see him because he was sitting behind the symbol of freedom, the guardian of the class, Big Papa Shirtian. What he had forgotten, however, was that the protagonist no longer had his giant form. Now he was short and skinny. As soon as the teacher made eye contact with him, all the students hurried back to their seats and pretended nothing had happened. But then they quickly began to cry, mourning the loss of their freedom, saying it was as if a lumberjack had destroyed their shelter and home. One girl broke into tears, saying she wasn't allowed to dance at home, and this had been her only chance to pursue her dream. The protagonist looked at her and gave her a small hand gesture. Upon seeing it, the girl, still crying, whispered that he was unbelievably handsome. During the lunch break, the same student from before stood nervously in place. The blonde-haired boy approached him and said, "Big Papa Shirtian is back. Do you think he's going to kill you?" Startled, the boy grabbed him by the collar and shouted, "How should I know? I didn't even know the gym was going to burn down that night." The blonde reminded him they had left the padlocks behind and that sooner or later the truth would come out. Faced with the possibility that the protagonist would come after them, one of them suggested they'd have to take him out first. Terrified, the blonde said he'd rather see him jump off a building than watch him get beaten within an inch of his life. The gray-haired boy insisted he was ready, but the blonde begged not to be involved this time. His friend replied that even if he didn't take part, once the protagonist found out the truth about the fire, he'd be beaten to death anyway. Saying that, he walked to a corner and started crying, regretting not being a good person from the start. His friend told him to shut up and repeated that he was ready. Then he asked if the blonde had seen the protagonist lately. He answered yes, that he was now skinny, and some people were even saying he'd had liposuction. The gray-haired boy declared that now was the perfect time to act. In a fight, weight mattered, and in his opinion, the protagonist was at his weakest. They headed to an old shed. The blonde, confused, asked where they were going, but his friend told him to just watch. In front of them were several thugs sitting around, and the gray-haired boy explained that they were the most ruthless gangsters from 20th Street. When the leader of the group heard the reason they'd been called, he got up from his throne and collapsed to the ground, yelling, "You want us to destroy that guy? I thought you called me out for some hot pot." Another gang member began trembling and said he thought they were going to eat crabs. That's why he brought his knife. The gray-haired boy tried to calm them down, assuring them the protagonist wouldn't eat them and would probably even throw them a party if they managed to beat him. Still, the gang leader dropped to the floor, shouting that it was all a scam. Another member, more determined, explained that beating the protagonist would set them up financially for life. But he admitted he had already faced him once, back when the protagonist had defended a bullied student. In that encounter, Shirtian had grabbed him so forcefully that he broke his arm, leaving him with a traumatic and unforgettable memory. When the name of the legendary fighter was mentioned, another thug, one carrying a knife, visibly flinched upon hearing the name of Big Daddy Shirtian again. The entire group began to sob in hushed panic, whispering desperately that they wouldn't risk their lives fighting someone like that. The knife-wielding thug tore off his shirt to reveal scars he'd carried since a previous encounter. With a trembling voice, he recalled how the protagonist had cornered him against a wall and ripped off his tattoo through sheer friction, leaving a permanent mark. Other gang members began crying too, lamenting the fact that they had to face such a cursed opponent. Trying to calm them down, the silver-haired boy showed them a recent photo of Shirtian. At first, the gang refused to look, paralyzed by fear. But when they finally glanced at the image, they were stunned to see a thin, almost frail young man who looked anything but threatening. The silver-haired boy explained that it really was Big Daddy Shirtian. After being engulfed in flames, he'd undergone surgery and lost a significant amount of weight. The gang fell silent, struggling to process such a drastic transformation. Then, the knife thug turned to the leader and asked what they should do. After a moment of reflection, the gang leader thought maybe they had a chance. He proposed a simple plan: ambush the weakened Shirtian and attack him all at once. The scene shifted to the school, where a visibly nervous blonde student approached the protagonist's desk with the task of planting a fake love letter meant to lure him into the trap. He believed no guy could resist a romantic confession. However, as he slipped the letter under the desk, he was shocked to find hundreds of genuine love letters already there. Panicking at the sight of his own deception, he stuffed all the letters into a bag and ran off to burn them. While walking, he realized that after doing something so despicable, he could never think of himself as a good person again. Later, when Shirtian returned to his desk and found the one remaining letter, he read it and became visibly irritated. The contents clearly upset him. As he left school, several gang members intercepted him on the street. Despite their menacing appearance and cocky attitude, the protagonist showed no fear at all. The silver-haired thug mocked him, saying that he surely hadn't suspected his date with a beautiful girl was just a trap to lure him in, and declared this would be his last day alive. But Shirtian calmly replied that he had known from the beginning it was a setup. Only someone like the silver-haired thug would write a love letter that read more like a death threat. Recognizing their familiar faces, he sarcastically asked if their skin wasn't starting to itch, implying they were about to get beat up. The silver-haired thug tried to rally the others, calling them experienced killers and demanding to know why they were acting so scared. But the rest were so terrified they could barely stand. The gang leader and the knife thug quickly made up an excuse, saying they were just out for a walk and it was pure coincidence that they happened to pass by. When the silver-haired boy insisted they were there to jump Shirtian, the others immediately silenced him, asking if he had a death wish, and warning him not to drag them into a suicide mission. Amidst the rising fear, the protagonist sensed the panic in the air and decided to show his strength by punching a nearby wall. But instead of the expected impact, he felt a sharp pain. He heard cracking sounds and saw blood begin to drip from his hand. He quickly covered it, confused and shaken by the intense pain, wondering if he had truly lost his strength after losing so much weight. It was in that moment that he realized just how dangerous his situation had become, that physical appearance meant nothing without real strength. He bitterly reflected that people only value power once it's gone, and he broke down in tears, remembering how strong he used to be. Despite his internal struggle, his mere presence was still so intimidating that the gang stayed frozen in fear. Yet the gang leader, watching closely, noticed something was off. If Big Daddy Shirtian had been at full strength, that wall would have been reduced to rubble. Suspecting that their legendary enemy had indeed grown weaker, he ordered the silver-haired thug to attack first, since he was the one who got them into this mess. Trembling, the thug approached the protagonist with fake politeness, and claimed it had all been a misunderstanding. He said he didn't want any trouble and reached out his hand, saying he just wanted to congratulate Shirtian on being discharged from the hospital, and apologize. But it was all a trick. His real plan was to squeeze Shirtian's hand and test his physical strength. As Shirtian looked at the extended hand, he noticed steam rising from his own due to the heat. The moment he grasped the thug's hand, the boy immediately screamed in agony, completely unable to break free from the burning grip. The rest of the gang, witnessing this terrifying display of power, fled in terror, convinced that Shirtian was still just as dangerous as ever. As they ran, they blamed the silver-haired boy for leading them straight into a death trap, abandoning him motionless on the ground. Meanwhile, Shirtian stared at his smoking hand as exhaustion washed over him. The effort had nearly made him lose consciousness, and he was on the verge of collapsing, wondering if he really had become this weak, and what he was going to do with his life from now on. In the end, his body gave out and he fainted. Some time later, a young woman appeared, standing before his unconscious body while holding a circular object that seemed to radiate a magical aura. Meanwhile, Shirtian found himself in an environment that felt like water, where a mysterious figure appeared before him. When he asked who it was, the figure replied that it was someone born from his soul who had accompanied him for 1,000 years. Shirtian looked at him with irritation, prompting the figure, slightly offended, to complain that he was ruining the atmosphere of their first reunion in a millennium. He then explained that he had appeared because Shirtian Tan was currently at a critical point between life and death, but promised to explain everything in more detail once he was awake and alone. When Shirtian opened his eyes, he saw a young woman helping him drink something soft, but suddenly he reacted with a shout. She quickly apologized, saying she hadn't found any other way to wake him up. She explained that she noticed his body trembled every time she shouted the name of a food item. She introduced herself as the same girl who had asked him a question in the hallway some time ago. She recounted that she had found him unconscious in an alley and was about to call emergency services when she heard his stomach growling. Frightened, she rushed him to the nearest convenience store. No matter how much she shook him, he wouldn't wake up. However, she discovered that whenever she mentioned foods like burgers, pizza, chicken, or chips, his body would twitch, and she realized he had fainted from hunger. So she bought a large soda and poured it into his mouth. With a sarcastic smile, Shirtian accused her of having fun with his unconscious body, to which she, slightly embarrassed, responded that if anyone ever bothered her, he should come tell her. As he was about to leave, she called out to him and asked him to eat properly, not to let himself die of hunger, and to take care of his health, causing Shirtian to blush. Then she asked him to add her as a contact, and he agreed. That night back home, Shirtian recalled the dream he had while unconscious. He remembered the voice he had heard while engulfed in flames during the fire, someone who had promised to meet him again when he was alone. Suddenly, he felt a burning sensation in his chest, and the spirit from the dream reappeared in front of him. Shirtian looked at him angrily, thinking the scene felt like something straight out of a fantasy novel. Grabbing a wooden stick, he pointed it at the spirit and demanded that he explain what he was in 3 sentences, or he'd hit him for the experience. The spirit introduced himself, saying he was born of fire, awakened by fire, and had now returned to Shirtian's side. His name was Jungli, also known as Dan, and he had been dormant within Shirtian for 1,000 years as a companion from a past life. Annoyed, Shirtian pointed out that was more than 3 sentences and that he still hadn't explained what kind of being he was. The spirit replied that Shirtian was being impatient, and revealed that he was actually his former life husband, a persistent soul bound to his current existence. This meant he had witnessed everything Shirtian had done lately, including the time he danced in front of the mirror. He went on to explain that he was indeed Shirtian's companion, but not in this life, rather, in a past era where the great Shirtian himself had been his wife. Upon hearing this, Shirtian immediately struck him with a wooden stick, sending the spirit flying through the air. As the spirit complained about the attack, Shirtian shouted that those 3 heartbreaking sentences had caused him emotional trauma. After that, Shirtian started wondering whether his current body still had the strength to break through walls with a single punch. The spirit begged him to calm down, admitting that he too was in shock after waking up and discovering that his wife from a past life was now a man. He nostalgically recalled how, in that former life, he used to call Shirtian darling every day. The word darling triggered something in Shirtian's mind, and he began reliving scenes from his previous life. The spirit, in human form, would bring breakfast to his wife, hand over his paycheck, and lovingly encourage her to get up early. She, in turn, would yell at him to go away, and he, unfazed, would reply sweetly that her bad temper was adorable. But the memory turned bitter as it showed the wife waking up, not for him, but for another man hiding in the closet. She would hug him passionately, tell him how much she missed him, and kiss him deeply. Seeing the shock and sadness on Shirtian's face, the spirit asked if he had remembered something important from his past life, noting that even if that life wasn't directly connected to the current one, the memories still mattered. Shirtian wondered why he suddenly felt so miserable. That's when the spirit began explaining what was happening to his body. Ever since Shirtian had lost weight, his hands sometimes burned and emitted smoke. It was all because the spirit's natal flame resided inside him. He revealed that in his past era, he had been one of the world's oldest fire cultivators, known as the God of Fire. He recounted how, in that time, a nearby mountain collapsed and giant boulders rained down. The desperate villagers turned to him for help. With total confidence, he told them not to panic and promised to handle the situation. He began reciting incantations and pointed at the falling rocks, but nothing happened. He was crushed by a massive stone. Before dying, he placed his natal flame inside his beloved wife, assuring her that as long as the flame remained within her, fire would never harm her, and that his soul would remain by her side and might one day awaken. However, she never truly understood what that meant. 3 months later, his wife looked exhausted and was desperately eating anything she could find, because the natal flame consumed everything and needed constant fuel, absorbing energy from the host's body. When there was no fat left to burn, it began feeding on vital organs like the heart and lungs. In an era when resources were scarce, his wife didn't survive for long. After finishing his story, Shirtian pointed out that there were many problematic parts in it, but tried to comfort the fire god by telling him that his wife never truly loved him, and that he shouldn't keep holding on. The melancholic spirit admitted he still missed her, and added that she had a beautiful body. When he began moving closer to the protagonist again, Shirtian stepped back in alarm, accusing him of being insane and demanding to know why he was approaching. The fire god apologized, saying that the wife from his past life had no connection to the current great Papa Chin. He added that although the protagonist had reincarnated many times, he had never been touched by fire, until now. Frustrated, Shirtian said that explanation only made him want to punch the spirit even more. The spirit continued, saying that the natal flame he had left inside him had awakened, and that's what had transformed his body. In short, Shirtian's body had turned into a furnace, and the natal flame was the fuel ignited. The heat generated came out through his hands, and the energy used came from his own body. When he asked if there was a way to shut down the defective furnace, the fire god replied that since he had dared to leave the flame behind, he naturally knew how to control it. That answer brought relief to Shirtian, until the spirit confessed he had forgotten the method, since he was merely a lingering fragment of soul after 1,000 years. Furious, Shirtian threatened to punch him again, and demanded he leave his body along with the ghostly flame, when suddenly, his stomach roared loudly. It had been 2 hours since he got home, and he hadn't eaten a thing. He was on the verge of fainting from hunger. Checking his bank balance on his phone, he found he didn't even have enough money to buy a bite of food. Collapsed on the floor, too weak to move, he called out to the fire god to bring him the meal he had left on the table, feeling that if he didn't eat soon, he'd die. The day before, he had ordered takeout and eaten everything left in the house. As soon as he took a bite of the malatang broth, his body came back to life. Watching the scene, the spirit asked if he was really that excited about such a fragrant meal. Shirtian replied that this broth was the only reason he was still alive, and that if he ever died of hunger, it would be the fire god's fault. The spirit, in a sweet tone, called him Shirtian, which made the protagonist scowl and demand he stop using that disgusting nickname. Instead, he suggested that in this life they be brothers, or even father and son. He warned the spirit that if he called him Shirtian again, he'd come up with an insulting nickname in return. After an awkward silence, the spirit gave a thumbs up and agreed to be good brothers. Later, Shirtian spent an hour curled up in a corner trying to process all the bizarre information. He estimated that with an appetite far greater than a normal person's, equivalent to 71 steamed buns drenched in malatang broth, his food expenses would exceed 10,000 yuan. His parents, who were abroad, strictly controlled his finances, so it was unlikely they'd send him money just to eat. Facing this crisis, he considered becoming a food content creator to earn some income, but until he succeeded, he didn't know how he'd survive his next meal. Just then, his phone buzzed with a message. The fire god asked what that shiny, noisy box in his pocket was. It was a message from the girl who had helped him earlier. She asked if he remembered her, saying she was the one who poured soda into his mouth when he passed out. She needed a favor and said they could talk at school the next day. She even offered to pay him and feed him. When he read the word food, Shirtian didn't hesitate. He bolted out the door. The fire god asked where he was going, and he answered with one word: survival. The next day, he met the girl at a restaurant and apologized for making her meet so late, explaining that he was in a seriously critical situation. She got straight to the point, but he asked nervously if someone was harassing her. However, she explained she wanted to hire him to work at her house. Surprised by the offer, he listened as she told him her family owned a gym, and that she'd been watching him since the school year began. She proposed he work with them for a while and participate in some before and after photoshoots for weight loss promotion. In exchange, she'd give him whatever he wanted. Without hesitation, Shirtian said he didn't need money, just food would be more than enough. The next day, standing in front of the gym, the protagonist stood next to a poster showing his before appearance alongside his new body. A huge crowd had gathered at the entrance, and the girl admitted she had never seen so many people show up. It looked like every woman in the area had come. Looking closer, she realized that less than half were actually interested in signing up. The rest were just drooling over Shirtian. One girl asked if he could be her personal trainer. A bit shy, he replied that he wasn't ready to be a coach yet, but he'd try his best. The girl, excited, ran off to fill out the registration form and signed up for 3 years. Another young woman asked if she could touch his chest muscles to confirm the physical results. Though she spoke shyly, he gently pulled her closer, making her blush deeply. The protagonist found the situation oddly familiar. Back in school, boys used to throw themselves at his chest and call him Daddy. Now, it was girls doing the same. Another girl ran to the front desk and said she wanted to sign up for the premium 5-year plan. By noon, the gym owner asked Shirtian what he wanted to eat, mentioning that they had gained over 300 new members that morning. Looking at the menu, Shirtian said he wanted 5 servings of everything. When asked if he planned to gain weight again, he also requested they pack the leftovers for takeout. Additionally, he asked for a personal training room. He needed to rebuild his strength. As he headed to his training session, he thought, now that his food problem was solved, it was time to regain his power and take the lead. At school, two great legends about fighters circulated. The first was Shirtian himself, formerly known as the Invincible Fatty. The second was even older. It wasn't about a student, but the school's head of discipline. In one scene, a girl was apologizing for being late, explaining she had stayed up studying. The director told her not to rush and to fix her appearance before coming in. Still, he warned her she would be marked late no matter what, but kindly asked her not to stay up again, calling her his most precious student. That man was Lin Pachin, 28 years old. At that moment, he noticed another student trying to sneak in. Realizing it was already 10 o'clock, he stopped him, saying he was late too. When he noticed the student had an injured hand, he asked what had happened. The student, visibly annoyed, said he had fallen and only scraped it. Lin Pachin corrected him, saying it wasn't a scrape, but a burn, and warned him with an unsettling expression not to lie, implying that someone had hurt his precious student. The scene then shifted to an exam room, where students were taking a test. Among them, a thug-like student was blatantly cheating. The supervising teacher caught him and asked him to hand over his answer sheets. The student, defiant, aggressively asked who the teacher thought he was and grabbed him by the neck. The teacher, completely calm, repeated his request while firmly gripping the student's wrist. Surprised by the teacher's strength, the student couldn't break free. Frustrated, he threw his exam sheet, said the test was worthless, and threatened to fight him outside. The teacher simply let him go without saying a word. Later, it was revealed that the student was the younger brother of a local gang member. That same afternoon, the older brother showed up at the school entrance and asked if the teacher was the one who had confronted his brother. Upon confirmation, the gang member suggested they step away from the school to avoid a violent scene. However, things didn't go as expected. When the students, alarmed by the shouting, called the police, the officers arrived at a chilling scene. The teacher, covered in blood, was calmly grading papers while around him lay moaning, battered bodies. Of the 23 involved, 18 had broken bones and 3 were critically injured. Only 2 came out unscathed. Amid the groans of pain, the teacher continued grading, unfazed, while at his feet, the student who had threatened revenge trembled in fear. The police, stunned by the sight, froze. The teacher, with a gentle smile, apologized and said he had been threatened and perhaps had gone a little overboard. From that day on, Lin Pachin became a legend at the school. In the present, while Shirtian was training in the gym, the gray-haired gang member reflected on how to escape his current situation. That's when the teacher placed a hand on his shoulder and asked if he was a third-year student. The gang member realized there was no fooling him, but an idea crossed his mind. What if he used that teacher as a tool for revenge? Shakily, he asked if he remembered a second-year student named Big Daddy Shirtian. The teacher replied that he had taught that grade, but the name didn't particularly ring a bell, though he vaguely recalled a large, burly kid. Hearing this, the gang member got excited. He said he was just asking out of curiosity, but added that he had a burn on his hand caused by someone with that name, though with a completely different build. He claimed the individual had threatened him by pretending to shake his hand and then burning him with something hidden, and that he had passed out because of it. He began to cry, saying he was terrified, that just thinking about the incident made him shake, and that he hadn't been able to do his homework since due to the trauma. The teacher told him not to worry about the assignment, and that he would talk to his homeroom teacher himself. Just as the gang member was leaving, Lin Pachin stopped him and asked if he could help him find Shirtian. Meanwhile, back at the gym, Shirtian, completely exhausted after an intense workout, heard the spirit say proudly, "Look, your physical condition is amazing now. No back pain, no sore legs, you can throw hundreds of punches without running out of breath. That's because my life flame has consumed all the unnecessary, useless parts of your body. My dear, your physical condition is now above that of any other young man." Still, Shirtian mentioned that he had taken a week to adjust to his part-time job and experiment with the gym equipment, but no matter what he did, it was clear he was struggling. Frustrated, he grabbed the fire god and told him to stop joking, remembering that he used to break punching bags with a single hit. As he complained, the spirit, taken aback by his words, replied that although he was weaker now, he had become much more handsome. At that moment, the school teacher appeared outside the gym. When he entered, he found Shirtian straining to lift some weights to shoulder height. It was obvious he had reached his limit. Shirtian was annoyed at his own weakness. His current body was too skinny, and in the past, he could lift heavy loads with ease. He felt all this effort was pointless. The teacher approached, easily lifted the same weights, and smiled, commenting that the boy was quite weak, and didn't seem like a bad person either. Then he stepped closer and asked if he was Shirtian. Upon receiving a yes, he dropped the weights and launched an attack. His fist nearly struck Shirtian's face, but the protagonist managed to block it with his hand. However, the impact sent him sliding backward and made his hand start to bleed. The teacher, surprised, thought that punch should have broken his nose. He wondered if he was dealing with a veteran, given how fast his reflexes were. Shirtian, on the other hand, could barely grasp what he had just experienced. That single punch felt like being hit by a car and almost made him faint. He asked the man who he was, to which he coldly replied, "I'm the retribution of everyone you've ever hurt." Shirtian narrowed his eyes and answered just as coldly, "So you're one of their accomplices." There's nothing more to say. Before he could move, the spirit beside him urged him to wait, and channeled magical energy into his hands. The teacher noticed smoke starting to rise from the boy's fist just as he wrapped his tie around his hand and charged forward, slamming his fists against the teacher's with a deafening crash. While they were fighting, the protagonist remembered the moment he decided to lose weight. He had trained for years in various martial arts, but had never found a worthy opponent. He recalled a student who used to challenge every newcomer, boasting that he'd make them cry in their first fight. He said the same thing to him, confident that even someone as fat as Shirtian would go down easily. However, Shirtian had stopped him with a single hand, grabbing him by the head. Later that same day, while the master was calmly eating his soup, a student burst in to report that his superior, Lambatian, had been defeated and was crying outside the classroom. The master remained calm and asked them to return to training, saying he'd take care of the new student himself, since it was just a minor issue. But Shirtian had sent him flying with a single blow. As the master was falling, he asked Shirtian to go easier on him. He wondered how someone with such a frail-looking body could have that much strength, to which Shirtian replied that he actually was going easy. That's when the protagonist realized he might never find a true rival in life unless he became weaker and slimmer. And yet, now, for the first time, he was facing real adversity. The master was like a small boat struggling to stay afloat against the storm of his fists. As Shirtian fought to stay on his feet, the master paused and praised him, saying 10 minutes had passed and he still hadn't given up. He confessed he was starting to admire him, but Shirtian, panting, shouted at him to shut up. He had appeared out of nowhere, hit him for no reason, and now, on top of that, was praising him like nothing happened. He asked if he was trying to piss him off even more. After exchanging a few more blows, Shirtian began to notice something odd. Every time he attacked, the master would stop his own strike, pull back, and dodge. Then, determined, Shirtian charged forward, ready to hit. However, as they fought, he felt something he hadn't in a long time, a spark of excitement. It was as if he had finally found what he'd been searching for all these years. With a smile, he shouted that he wanted to see who would fall first. Just then, the door slammed open and a girl entered, visibly annoyed by the noise. When she saw the master, she asked sharply what he was doing there. Then, noticing his opponent, she gasped in surprise, realizing he had hit student Shirtian, and added how handsome he was. The master froze upon learning that Shirtian was actually enrolled in the school. Later, he approached Shirtian to apologize, admitting he had trusted the wrong person and it was all his fault. In response, Shirtian crossed his arms and told him he'd been hit 26 times, so he at least wanted to return a single blow. This surprised the girl from the gym. However, the master said he could do it and that he would prepare himself. But instead, Shirtian offered him something he had prepared especially, an extremely spicy sauce that he had to drink down to the last drop if he wanted to be forgiven. As the master drank the sauce, Shirtian thought that it was the first time he had ever faced an opponent he couldn't beat easily. He didn't know whether to feel happy or annoyed, but in that moment, during the fight, his heart had pounded hard. Later that night, back at home, Shirtian told the spirit to stay away while he went to sleep. However, the spirit asked him to wait. It had something important to say. It explained that during the fight, Shirtian's hands had ignited in flames, and that was the first time in 1,000 years it had tried to manipulate fire. As a result, it realized it had recovered part of its memory and powers. In that sense, the spirit had noticed three things. First, it had discovered a way to return Shirtian's body to normal. Second, both the master and the girl seemed suspicious. And third, it observed that the girl possessed something no mortal should have. As for the master, it clearly remembered the aura surrounding him. During dinner, while sitting nearby, the spirit had heard him mutter that Lin Pachin was still as irritable and impulsive as ever, and that he didn't deserve to be called by a certain title. That aura, according to the spirit, wasn't human at all. When Shirtian asked what he meant by that, the spirit replied that there was a supreme secret in the world. Despite having been deified in his previous life and ruling over all, he had never been satisfied, driven by deep curiosity about the unknown beyond. Then he remembered how, in the past, while alone, his wife approached and told him to go on a journey for exactly 3 years without asking questions. And so, he left in his chariot of fire. Shirtian thought that she probably had a good time with the entire village during those 3 years. The spirit went on, saying that when he finally returned, he had discovered secrets capable of shaking the earth. From then on, he continued heading north, never looking back, though he eventually returned with great knowledge. Shirtian, disappointed by the story, ran, grabbed a book from the shelf, and smacked the spirit with it, telling him to shut up because he was going to sleep. The spirit, unfazed, asked if he was perhaps interested in his wife. As Shirtian walked away, the spirit said he'd get straight to the point. He had witnessed many races, strange plants, and animals, and for that reason, he had catalogued and organized them, writing 7 medicinal formulas designed to warm the spirit and nourish the soul. He particularly remembered one of them, and since he was now just a wisp of a soul, he believed that if he could prepare it correctly, he might be able to recover more memories, perhaps even remember how to control the flames. The ingredients of this formula were ginger, garlic, Sichuan peppercorn, and chili. On the other hand, regarding the teacher and the girl, it was explained that the girl possessed something resembling a compass, an object he had been observing for some time, which emitted spiritual fluctuations. It might have been a family heirloom, or perhaps she had come across it by accident. In any case, it wasn't something an ordinary person should possess. She was probably some kind of monster hiding among humans. The scene then shifted to the teacher standing before a picture frame and some incense sticks, apologizing to the photo. He said that he had once again spoken with his old friend, that he had harmed a student, and that he had acted wrongly. As he looked at the photo, he confessed he could never be like him, that learning to be human was incredibly difficult. The next day at school, the boy with flashy hair was being beaten by the teacher while apologizing for lying. The teacher told him he shouldn't have done it, but he would forgive him anyway, because he had made a promise to protect all the students there, and that boy was one of them. That's why he could only forgive him. Still, he grabbed him by the collar and warned him never to lie again, walking away while adding that if he ever did it again, he'd break his nose and his arms. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the school, a group of girls blushed and screamed with excitement upon seeing Shirtian, right as the teacher called out to him. Seeing the two together, the other students began whispering that the school's 2 greatest legends were meeting, wondering if something had happened between them. Shirtian asked why the teacher was there, and he replied that since the school day was nearly over, he had come to find him and ask if he wanted to take a walk through the bamboo garden. At that moment, Shirtian remembered what the spirit had told him, that the teacher might be some kind of demon. When he glanced at him sideways, the teacher noticed his expression and asked if he was suspicious of him, saying he didn't need to be. He reminded him that he hadn't looked so tense a few days earlier when they had shared a meal. Seeing his face, the teacher guessed that the spirit behind Shirtian had told him everything. Both he and Shirtian were surprised to realize he could perceive it. Shirtian confirmed it, and the teacher replied that's why his hands had burst into flames, that it was now much easier to communicate. He asked Shirtian to tell the spirit that he meant no harm, either to him nor to the other students. He explained that the area had once been a vast bamboo forest before the school was built. Now, only a small patch remained. He then confessed that he wasn't human and that he had been born there. He was a bamboo spirit who had cultivated himself for 1,000 years to gain a human form, spending countless days in that place until he finally gained consciousness. However, on that very night, a heavenly tribulation struck him with lightning. The forest was reduced to that tiny patch, and he was gravely wounded, reverting to his original form until someone took him home. The scene showed the teacher planting a bamboo shoot. A passing worker asked what he was planting since it looked broken and worn out. The teacher replied it was a piece of bamboo he had picked up from the site of a fire the day before and that he hoped it would survive. From that moment on, the bamboo remained there, growing thanks to water and nutrients. Some time later, a boy tried to impress a girl by carving their names into its leaves, and another boy threw a ball that hit the plant. The bamboo swore that once it could move, it would kill them all. Later, another student pressed a lit cigarette against one of its leaves. A passing classmate saw them smoking and nervously asked what they were doing. The group looked down as they kept smoking, but one of them gave him a threatening look that frightened him, and another warned him that if he dared tell anyone, they'd beat him up, claiming that same guy had already sent 52 people to the hospital that year, filling the student with fear. The bully ordered him to stay quiet and said it was all the new teacher's fault, the one who had recently transferred. That same morning, he had confiscated their phones after catching them skipping class and playing around in the bathroom, since he actually inspected student bathrooms. He even made them write a 5,000-word essay. The day before, during lunch, one of them had tried to force another student to buy him food, but the teacher caught him. This time, the punishment was an 8,000-word essay and a public apology. The bully said the teacher was driving them insane and that they were furious. He suggested the student walk away if he didn't want to get hurt. But then, the group's leader stepped in and told his subordinate to leave the kid alone, saying it was time to go back to class before they got caught again. The subordinate, feeling humiliated, muttered that the whole thing was ridiculous and asked if that wasn't the same bamboo the teacher had planted, adding that next time, he'd pour boiling water on it. Later, the teacher was tending to the bamboo, wondering why he couldn't get it to grow properly. Suddenly, after a long silence, the bamboo exploded and spoke, saying it was absolutely furious. Even if it wasn't supposed to talk, and even if it risked losing its cultivation, it had to speak up. The teacher, confused, wondered where the voice was coming from and whether the bamboo had really spoken. The bamboo replied not only that it could talk, but that it could even be the teacher's father. It went on to scold him for being crazy enough to pick it up and plant it there, surrounded by trees and sycamores, as the only bamboo in the area, practically a laughingstock to everyone who passed by. The bamboo spirit began to explain that most of the people who had heard it were actually the teacher's own students. Angry, it demanded to know how many students he had mistreated, saying that the students picked on him, and he, in turn, picked on them. The teacher, still surprised, asked how it was possible that the bamboo could speak. The bamboo introduced itself as a benevolent spirit, a bamboo spirit struck by lightning, still in the process of recovering. It thanked the teacher for saving it and assured him that once it achieved human form, it would help him deal with the students. However, it also warned that not a single student wished him well, that all the troublemakers wanted revenge, and that the rest only spoke badly of him behind his back. It asked the teacher to help it recover and get out of that place, promising that in return it would help him get revenge. But the teacher firmly refused, saying he could never allow harm to come to his students. Then he lifted the bamboo and said it was too dangerous to leave there, so he took it home and planted it in a pot. For a while, life was peaceful, and the bamboo remembered those days fondly. However, one day it asked the teacher why he wouldn't let it attack the students. The teacher replied that he himself had gone through a rebellious phase and that he didn't believe those youths were bad, just lacking guidance, and that his desire was to show them the beauty of life and help them find the right path. When the teacher tried to make a comparison between the bamboo and his students, the spirit immediately rejected it, refusing to be treated like one of them. Still, life went on calmly for a few months, but the bamboo realized too late that it had made a mistake. Being a newly formed spirit struck by lightning, it was weak and had become an ideal target for cultivators. It really shouldn't have stayed with the teacher. One memory, in particular, was deeply engraved. The teacher was sitting next to the bamboo eating watermelon, and the bamboo asked him to pour a little juice onto its leaves to feel what a human sensation was like. Just as the teacher was about to do so, someone knocked on the door. When he opened it, he found a group of troublesome students. He asked why they were there but noticed something strange in their eyes. Before he could react, they shoved him aside and began to attack him. The story then flashed back to an earlier scene outside the men's bathroom, where some students were loafing around while 3 delinquents smoked inside. They complained about how the teacher kept catching them and how their disciplinary grades were dropping so much that they might not graduate. While discussing their frustrations, someone entered the bathroom. It wasn't a student they recognized. The group warned the stranger not to come in while they were smoking, but he ignored them. One of the delinquents, annoyed, tried to grab him but was stopped with just one finger, leaving his hand completely numb. The man, calm and serene, said their violence came from a lack of education. Moreover, he wasn't a student but a cultivator searching for spiritual medicine. He admitted to having been watching them and began manipulating their minds and desires. Back at the teacher's house, chaos erupted as the possessed students violently attacked him. One of them said he had been waiting a long time for the chance to hit him, and when the teacher tried to defend himself verbally, he was interrupted mid-sentence by a punch. Another shouted that everything would have been fine if the teacher had just left them alone. Even as they grabbed him by the neck, the teacher remained calm and tried to reason with them, saying he saw a wider, happier path for them and that his desire was to show them that way. Reaching out toward the pot where the bamboo was planted, he let go of all resistance, and suddenly the room exploded with energy. The windows shattered, and the students were thrown through the air from the third floor. When the teacher opened his eyes, he saw the bamboo spirit, now in human form, standing beside him. The bamboo scolded him mockingly for not resting longer, and mentioned that it had saved his life by throwing the students out. Terrified, the teacher asked who it was, to which it proudly responded that now with a human body, it wanted to experience the life path the teacher often talked about. The narration then jumped to the present, where the bamboo spirit was telling this story to the protagonist. When the protagonist asked what happened next, he was surprised to learn that nothing else happened. The villain never returned, and the bamboo simply stayed by the teacher's side, protecting him. However, in that present scene, the bamboo warned the current teacher that they were in grave danger, revealing that the student who had attacked earlier was being controlled, and that a cultivator was hidden inside the school, after the bamboo's body. When asked what they should do, the bamboo said they needed to stick together at all times, even when going to the bathroom. As a solution, it proposed being allowed to experience the path of life by becoming a teacher. In the next scene, inside the classroom, the teacher held a bamboo stick that was the transformed spirit. While explaining a lesson, the students whispered among themselves, wondering why their teacher, once known for his love of plants, was now carrying a bamboo pointer. Back in the current timeline, the bamboo said that 36 years had passed since it had been used as a pointer, but that during all that time it had maintained total vigilance. The protagonist abruptly interrupted, telling it to stop talking nonsense, but the bamboo firmly replied that yes, it had indeed been used for 36 years and had been watching the teacher all that time. Although the villain never showed up, both the protagonist and the spirit felt deeply disappointed by that story. Then the bamboo revealed that the original master had passed away a few years ago from a natural illness, and his last wish was for the bamboo spirit to continue down the same path of life. That's why he stayed, fulfilling the final wish of his old friend. He added that he still felt as if someone was watching him, possibly the same culprit from back then, and asked the protagonist not to reveal that he wasn't human, as he didn't want to betray the trust of his deceased friend. The protagonist promised to keep the secret, and in return, asked a favor. He wanted to know where to find certain ingredients. At that moment, the scene briefly shifted to show a mysterious man observing both the protagonist and the bamboo master from afar. Then the protagonist returned to his daily routine, eating, helping others, and receiving constant stares from a student. Meanwhile, his desk at school was covered with love letters. Around that time, the protagonist mentioned that he was just beginning his cultivation journey, so the bamboo spirit offered him a special website to help him out. Confused, the protagonist asked what kind of site it was. The bamboo explained it was a place where modern cultivators gathered and asked him to call when he logged in. That same night, the protagonist entered the website and was amazed. It seemed like a completely different world. Slapping the table with his hand, he called the bamboo to ask how many cultivators there were. The spirit answered that there were around 1.2 million. The protagonist was stunned. The master explained that there were many extraordinary people with unique abilities known as heirs of traditional arts, and these abilities were considered intangible cultural heritage. That's why there was a dedicated website, and even a government department tasked with preventing these esoteric arts from being lost. Some sales within the community had even kick-started this effort, with the government involved as well. The protagonist was even more surprised to hear that most cultivators couldn't dodge a sniper bullet traveling thousands of meters per second, but by using these esoteric arts, they could do so with ease. However, he also mentioned that many were arrested every year for breaking the law, and anyone who strayed, even slightly, from the path was warned. Finally, the bamboo shared the story of a man from the region, explaining that cultivation nowadays consumes a lot of time and isn't profitable. According to the story, the man had dedicated 20 years to practicing Ju cultivation, but his wife scolded him daily for not having a real job. Meanwhile, one of his friends, who had moved to the city, had already built a huge house. Over time, many of those skills were lost. The bamboo added that cultivation had become much more practical and adapted to the modern world. Therefore, he recommended that the protagonist simply register his information on a special website where he would find many guides to help him get oriented, opportunities to communicate with other cultivators, and even in-person events like blind dates and group meetups. Additionally, as an extra benefit, by registering he could receive monthly deliveries of cooking oil and rice. Upon hearing this, the protagonist curiously asked exactly how much food he would receive while starting to fill out the form with his details. Meanwhile, at school, Shirtian continued stealing hearts without even trying thanks to his new striking appearance. The girls whispered and laughed around him, visibly captivated, while he silently wondered why he hadn't received any response from the form he had submitted quite some time ago. As usual, his desk was covered with fan letters, but this time there was something else, a mysterious gift box. Intrigued, he carefully opened it, and was completely shocked to find a ring inside. Immediately, he jumped up and loudly asked who had put it on his desk, as he thought it was an extravagant and inappropriate gift. However, his classmates looked at him with genuine confusion, and no one claimed to be the sender. The next day, he received a PlayStation. The day after, a heart-shaped box of chocolates. Later, a high-end graphics card. And by the fifth day, yet another mysterious gift appeared. At this point, Shirtian was completely overwhelmed. It wasn't just simple fan letters anymore. Someone was going way too far. Worried, he realized he had to find out who was behind all this, even though none of the notes had any name or signature. That night, Shirtian took all the gifts and letters home. The spirit inside him, visibly curious, asked what he was doing. He replied that he was reading every single letter because he didn't have the heart to throw them away. Although some were quite ridiculous, they had all been written with genuine feelings. He then explained that the letters could be classified into three main types. The first were from people asking for advice on losing weight. The second, rather strange, called him Dad, and the third, which were the most numerous, were where they confessed their love to him. Annoyed, Shirtian shouted that none of the letters mentioned sending gifts. The spirit, a bit jealous, said he envied the protagonist for receiving so much attention. Shirtian, on the verge of losing patience, gave him a slap to calm him down, and the spirit, trying to make peace, suggested that maybe the person sending the gift simply wanted to remain anonymous, perhaps didn't expect anything in return, and had no bad intentions. However, Shirtian firmly denied it, saying he had principles and couldn't accept such lavish gifts without knowing the identity of the sender, so he decided he would return them sooner or later. Nevertheless, right after saying that, his stomach made a loud growl. Somewhat embarrassed, he murmured that he was just going to eat a little piece of chocolate, and began searching for the heart-shaped box. However, things were about to get even more complicated. While Shirtian was peacefully sleeping, his phone suddenly rang. Half asleep, he answered the call from an unknown number. On the other end, a man asked if he was speaking with Shirtian. Still groggy, he replied by asking who was calling. The man introduced himself as a staff member from the Traditional Arts Protection Network and informed him that they had received his application and would soon visit his home to verify the information. Before that, he needed to join a nearby community group, and to facilitate his entry, they sent him a QR code. Annoyed, Shirtian thought it all seemed way too modern but scanned the code anyway. As soon as he joined the group, his phone started vibrating non-stop with a flood of notifications. The group was complete chaos. People were selling strange items, homemade medicines, and even stranger things, like some kind of hidden black market. Amid all the disorder, the members worshipped a figure known as the ancestor Syzygy, whom everyone praised as a true role model in the cultivation world. Suddenly, the ancestor Xiao sent a PDF file to the group. Expecting to find an ancient manual full of wisdom, Shirtian opened it eagerly. But instead, the title read Business Secrets, How to Get Rich, Complete Table of Contents. Disgusted and frustrated, Shirtian slammed his phone on the table and immediately typed a message saying he was leaving that silly group. But just then, Ancestor Xiao stopped him by starting a private chat and messaging him directly, which instantly left Shirtian confused and irritated. He responded angrily, asking why he was being messaged and demanding to be left alone. However, to his surprise, Xiao asked if he was a student at SH High School No. 1, which made Shirtian freeze, wondering how someone he didn't know could possibly know that. That's when Xiao dropped the bombshell. She was the president of Shirtian's fan club, which left him completely stunned. To make matters worse, Xiao admitted that she had recently taken a secret photo of him, and then confessed that she was the one who had been sending all the mysterious gifts. Next, she wrote something that made the protagonist tremble. Shirtian has lost weight lately. He's not as cute anymore. I hope he gains a little back soon. Which horrified him even more. As if that weren't enough, the final blow was that Xiao was actually a girl. From that moment, the story shifted to the past, revealing that ancestor Xiao was actually Xiao Dayan, who began to tell her personal story. She explained that while some girls were attracted to rich guys and others to handsome boys, she had only ever fallen in love with one person, the chubby but adorable Shirtian. Since childhood, she had been a terrible student. Despite trying hard, she always failed her exams and never managed to pass. One day, unexpectedly, her father burst into her room dramatically. Although she thought he was going to scold her, he instead said she didn't need to worry because no one in their family had ever passed an exam. According to him, she should give up because failure was a family tradition, a fact he claimed was proven by the fact that her hairband had the word "probar," to try, misspelled, sealing her fate. However, instead of scolding her, her father pulled an old dusty scroll from a drawer and explained that it was a family relic, a divination guide so precise it could predict anything anywhere. Xiao was devastated because all she wanted was to pass her exams, not become a street fortune teller. But after some thought, she had an idea. What if the method actually worked? Though doubtful, she decided to learn how to predict the future. On her next exam, instead of studying, she answered using divination coins and predictive techniques and, surprisingly, passed. From that day on, she used this method to cheat throughout high school and somehow managed to get into the same high school as Shirtian. Once there, a teacher was frustrated while looking over her exam paper, unable to make sense of it. Another teacher, a specialist in the subject, came over and asked what was going on. With a sigh, the first teacher replied that they had a new problematic student who, despite answering almost all multiple-choice questions and technical exercises with apparent ease, wrote essays full of absurd logic and made serious mistakes in math, physics, and chemistry. Moreover, she only submitted final answers, many of them strange, without showing her work. Shaking his head, the teacher murmured that he no longer understood this new generation of students. Intrigued, the bamboo spirit teacher decided to intervene and promised to take action. That's how the day of the decisive exam arrived. Among the students was Ju, who, upon seeing the exam, completely blanked out because all the questions required written answers, no multiple choice, and demanded deep analysis and reasoning. There was no way to guess, improvise, or manipulate the results. Overwhelmed by panic and trembling hands, she realized that without her divination method, she wouldn't pass the semester. Unable to do anything else, she broke down in tears. In her mind, she imagined the teacher looking at her blank paper, saying he couldn't even see the ink while the other students laughed at her. She thought about copying from the textbook but saw the teacher at the front of the classroom, staring at her like a hawk, which made her give up. Convinced that this was divine punishment, she prayed desperately for someone, anyone, to come and save her. Just then, unexpectedly, the protagonist burst into the classroom and sat right in front of her. At that moment, looking at his back, Yao saw him as an angel. There was something in his posture, something firm and protective, that reminded her of the comforting presence of her parents, filling her heart with warmth. Unable to resist, she quietly started copying from his exam while still crying. Although she didn't faint after the test, something inside her changed forever. That moment became her turning point. She vowed never to cheat again and committed herself to studying honestly from that day forward. It was then that she truly fell in love with the protagonist. Later, she confessed that from that moment on, no matter where she was or what she was doing, her eyes always sought him out. She felt their paths were bound by fate. However, he didn't share that feeling and was clearly annoyed, thinking the only reason she had noticed him was probably because of his large size. Then, shyly, she asked what class he was in and his name. Realizing he hadn't shared his identity, he decided to lie, claiming he was a classmate and friend of Sidon, which completely surprised her. After that, in a kind tone, he advised her to stop sending anonymous gifts and instead talk to Shirtian directly, face her fears and honestly confess her feelings. Gio, blushing deeply, replied that doing something like that seemed way too bold, like a scene straight out of a romantic movie. Despite that conversation, the gifts kept coming day after day. Different snacks, meals, and little presents, making everything more and more absurd, especially since the protagonists remained convinced that whoever was sending them was actually a boy secretly watching him. To make matters worse, this person always brought food he simply couldn't refuse. One day, right after finishing one of those dishes, someone burst in shouting enthusiastically, asking if Shirtian's dad was there. Seeing the protagonist, the newcomer said a first-year girl was waiting for him in the hallway. Confused, the young man went to the door and, upon meeting the girl, wondered if it was really her. Without beating around the bush, the young woman explained she wanted to take some photos of him. Meanwhile, nearby students started murmuring about how many different girls had confessed their feelings to him over the last few days. She mentioned she knew he worked at the gym and had even contacted the manager to arrange a promotional photo shoot featuring him training for an advertisement poster. But her real goal was to get closer to him. Later, at the gym, the girl confidently took several poster-style photos of the protagonist in various poses. Once the session was over, still catching his breath, the protagonist turned to the gym manager and asked about the girl's story. The manager smiled as she watched the girl pack up her camera and said she and Xiao had known each other for a long time. She described Xiao as always a bit mysterious but a good person. Then, pausing, she added that Xiao had guided her through tough times with just the right words at just the right moments. And because of that, she carried a compass with her. Though it might sound silly, the manager confessed that Xiao's advice had never led her astray. The scene then shifted to another place where an elderly man sat silently. He was a fortune teller, suddenly interrupted by an older woman who dropped some money on the table and demanded a reading about her love life. Proudly, she claimed to be the leader of the neighborhood's largest square dancing team and wanted to know if she or her rival would win the heart of the recently retired Professor Wong. The fortune teller asked for her hand and, gripping it firmly, caused her to flinch and pull away abruptly, accusing him of being too rough. He explained he was doing a bond reading and needed a strong grip to get an accurate result. He then declared her luck in love was very low, and that her rival was most likely going to be the one to kiss the professor. Furious at the prediction, the woman kicked him and stormed off indignantly. The old man, still rubbing his hand, muttered that she was crazy as he got up and began gathering his things. At that moment, a strange man appeared, an unusual-looking cultivator. The fortune teller asked if he wanted a reading, but the cultivator shook his head, explaining he'd come to propose an alliance. He added that unlike the woman who had just left, he truly understood the real situation. Meanwhile, the woman ran toward the square but suddenly stopped dead in her tracks when she saw the man she liked, Professor Hang, standing beside the rival team's leader. Both were laughing and talking intimately. Then, without warning, they leaned in and kissed, silently breaking her heart. What no one knew was that the old fortune teller was no ordinary man, but one of the 10 most powerful cultivators in the world of Hyanggu, known as the ancestor of calculation. When recognized, the old man grew nervous, forced out a laugh, hurriedly packed up, and tried to escape, unwilling to get involved in trouble. However, the cultivator chased after him, lifting his 3-wheeled cart into the air with one hand. Alarmed, the old man demanded to know what he wanted. The young man explained he wasn't a city guard or part of the traditional arts protection group but was also on the run. He asked the old man to look him in the eyes to prove his sincerity. Finally, they sat down to eat together, and while sharing the food, the cultivator recalled how, in the past, he had been incredibly skilled, so much so that he could eat 6 portions without any trouble. Then he asked the old man how someone with such talent had ended up working as a fortune teller. The old man, with a mix of resignation and bitterness, confessed that years ago he had made a mistake. He miscalculated a fortune-telling. He got involved in an online casino scam and lost everything. Even with his divine abilities, his entire pension disappeared. That was how he ended up ruined, making a living through fortune-telling. Curious, he then asked the cultivator about his story. The cultivator replied that things were more complicated than they seemed and that he wasn't even human. In fact, he was a demon who had cultivated until reaching a spiritual form. To prove it, he revealed his true form, a bamboo rabbit. Startled, the old man scolded him for showing that appearance in public, warning that someone might see him. But the rabbit spirit reassured him, saying he had already cast an illusion spell to prevent any passerby from noticing. With a sigh, he began to tell his story. He said he had lived near a mountain full of bamboo, which was his main food source, and that there was one huge, highly nutritious bamboo stalk he planned to eat on his 1000th birthday. However, before that day came, the bamboo gained consciousness, became a spirit, and fled by flying away. The spiritual tribulation that followed caused thunder, lightning, and the total destruction of the bamboo forest in a fire. The worst part, explained the rabbit, was that the bamboo spirit that escaped had become too strong to defeat. For the past 40 years, the rabbit spirit had disguised himself as various students to observe and ambush it but had never gotten a real chance. He had seen that bamboo spirit rise from being a simple teacher to becoming the head of the academy, and recently even befriending a cultivator. Frustrated, the rabbit exclaimed that all he wanted was to eat some bamboo. That wasn't too much to ask, and indignantly claimed he was on the side of justice. The old man told him to calm down, and the rabbit nodded, explaining that's precisely why he came to ask for help. If the old man paid him enough, he would probably agree to cooperate. He promised good food and a few thousand yuan, but the old man wasn't convinced and demanded 60,000 yuan. The rabbit froze at that and exploded, yelling if the old man was trying to rob him, claiming his fee was too high. He complained that his only source of income for the last 40 years had been stealing from younger students every single day, rain or shine, and despite that constant effort, he'd only managed to gather 60,000 yuan, so much so that he was now even dipping into his wife's savings. With a sarcastic tone, the old man told him to stop making up nonsense, that he was broke too, and asked him to think carefully about what was more important, his wife or his bamboo food. The rabbit answered without hesitation, the rat wife. In that case, the old man wanted to know why he needed his help. The rabbit explained that the bamboo spirit had a friend, a young man who seemed to have the power to warm his hands, and that this boy had been marked as a target by a fortune-telling cultivator. According to him, their relationship followed a dangerous pattern, and he hoped the old man could hold those two students back for a while, giving him a chance to fight the bamboo spirit one-on-one. Then, with a teasing tone, he added that the old man would surely be interested in that girl since she belonged to the Shao family, the very family he hated so much. Upon hearing that, the old man smiled slyly and replied that if that was the case, he would accept the job. The rabbit thought that meant a discount, but the old man quickly clarified that for giving him that information, he would only deduct 80 yuan. Furious, the rabbit shouted that the amount didn't even cover the food he had promised. Meanwhile, after several hours of intense training at the gym, the protagonist finally left the place when Xiao stopped him outside. She asked if they could walk together, since they apparently were headed the same way. Unexpectedly, she mentioned the past, recalling how she first noticed him during the final exams. Back then, he was quite chubby, and she confessed that she was surprised to see how calm and fit he was now. She also admitted that even after he had lost all that weight, she hadn't been able to stop thinking about him. Just as it seemed she was about to confess her feelings, the protagonist sensed something strange in the atmosphere and told her they'd talk later. Although they were in the city center, he hadn't seen a single pedestrian for several minutes, which felt suspicious, especially when he noticed an old man following them from behind. At the same time, back at school, the rabbit spirit was heading toward the bamboo teacher with clear intentions. But before he could get close, a student saw him, ran over, and hugged him tightly, calling him soft and fluffy, convinced he was a boy disguised in a Pikachu costume. Seeing this, the teacher immediately scolded him, explaining that costumes were not allowed at school, and ordered the supposed rat to take off the costume and come with him to the office. However, The rat spirit, visibly annoyed, shouted that he wasn't wearing any costume. Meanwhile, the protagonist confronted the old man who had been following them. Ju, suspicious, asked what he wanted, and the old man admitted that he was impressed by the intensity in the young man's eyes, so he wanted to ask a favor. He then confessed that he had been hired to slow them down but was willing to give the protagonist 59,000 of the 60,000 yuan he had been paid, keeping only 1,000 for himself. As an alternative, he suggested they use that money to go shopping while he carried out his task. To gain their trust, he even offered to reveal who had sent him. Meanwhile, back at school, as the teacher escorted the rat spirit to the principal's office, the latter saw an opportunity and suddenly launched a surprise attack with a flurry of punches. However, he immediately realized he had failed, since the teacher was no longer in front of him, but right behind him. Calmly, the teacher remarked that he sensed a demonic energy emanating from him and accused him of secretly conspiring. In response, the rat exploded with fury, claiming he wasn't just anyone, but his father, that he had raised him, changed his diapers, and tended to him for 500 years. Without waiting for a reply, he lunged again, and the two violently collided in a fierce battle. While all this was happening, the protagonist kept pressing the old man about who had sent him. Laughing brazenly, the old man replied that if he really wanted to know, he would have to face him. He introduced himself as a martial artist who did 50 push-ups, ran 5 kilometers, and did 30 sit-ups every day, adding that he could climb 6 flights of stairs without breaking a sweat. He admitted he hesitated to fight because he feared the battle would get too bloody. Suddenly, his body began to expand, his muscles defined intensely, and his size increased considerably, leaving the protagonist completely stunned. At that moment, the fire spirit floating nearby murmured that the scene was nostalgic. To everyone's surprise, even Xiao clearly saw the spirit. The old man then struck a heart-shaped pose, threw a few punches into the air, and declared he was ready to fight. Still confused, the protagonist asked how he had acquired such a body, to which the spirit explained that by channeling spiritual energy into the muscles, one could temporarily transform the body into the desired form using an ancient technique known as the golden body of Dharma. Then the old man warned that his only intention was to delay them a few hours, but if the young man resisted, he might break some bones, since he had private matters to discuss with Xiao. When he tried to touch her, the protagonist immediately intervened, blocking him with such force that the old man felt intense heat radiating from his hand. Xiao stepped back, alarmed, and asked the young man to be careful. After the first attack, the old man shouted, accusing him of being too cruel and asking how he dared disrespect his elders, while the protagonist, shocked, realized he had been sent flying with a single punch. It was then that he understood the situation was far more serious than he had imagined. The old man was too strong to face without prior preparation. The spirit then explained that if the young man concentrated and thought of his most powerful form, he could reshape his body. Since he hadn't cultivated enough yet, the spirit lent him some of his own energy to help. When the old man lunged at him again, he was surprised to see that the protagonist's body had already changed. His old chubby figure had returned, but this time it was packed with strength. With ease, the young man blocked the attack and, with a confident smile, slammed the old man to the ground. Intrigued, the spirit asked how it felt to return to his old body, and he replied that it felt incredible, as if he had regained his youth. Next, he grabbed the old man by the leg, spun him in the air, and threw him a great distance. Xiao, who had been watching closely, looked at him with admiration, feeling lucky to witness such a transformation. However, the spirit warned that the young man could only maintain that form for 3 minutes, as his spiritual energy was rapidly depleting. Now incredulous, the old man murmured that the power difference between them was like facing a mountain. Still, he tried to convince himself that although the protagonist was big, he couldn't be fast. Then he charged directly at Xiao, but the young man appeared behind him in an instant and effortlessly lifted him off the ground. The old man cried out that his back hurt, while the protagonist warned that if he kept resisting, he would end up with broken bones and shredded muscles. Finally, the spirit, who continued watching attentively, noticed the young man's energy was nearly depleted and concluded that the battle was coming to an end.